Hello, we're going to look at into today. So if you create a struct, for instance, called to do, then you can create an implementation of it. So that's your functions which operate on that struct. When you create your constructor, call it new. Normally, you would pass in a function, a parameter name, followed by a type. Here, we're passing in the type, which is a string, but that is inside the implementation of into. What does that mean? Well, what it actually means is by using into with capitals here, you can then apply the corresponding function within your constructor. Then when the time comes to actually use it in main, let's go and have a look. So we'll create a to do, and it is to do double colon new. So it's constructor. We're creating an instance of the to do struct. Title is task as per the prototype. Here, let me get rid of this. This is what you would have needed ordinarily had we not used implement into and into here. So when we compile this, this will work. It will compile. And what's so unusual about this? Well, we're passing in a string literal. String literals, as we say, are stored in the binary executable itself, so not on the stack or the heap. So that there is not a string, but because we've used into here, it will compile. So let's compile it, and it's compiled successfully. And you can see here, task 1. So it has compiled, even though we've passed in string literal, but it wanted a string. And that's because we've used impl into string. Now, there's a corresponding trait called from, which works in much the same way. I'm not going to cover it here. There's an article on my redandgreen.co.uk website if you want to look. One other thing, just while I think of it, this is kind of new to me. So I was watching the Jeremy Choan Axum video, and when he compiled his struct, he'd not actually used it. So I was thinking, well, why are there no any unused variable compile messages? I thought, well, maybe it's because he's using -q for quiet. It wasn't. It was because even in his main, where he declared the struct, he'd put pub in front of the word struct, and he'd put pub in front of the keys. So compile it, fine, no problems. If let's delete those, let's delete that. Compile it now. You see all these errors. Well, not errors, but the warnings. Now, the way to get rid of that, usually I would just do allow unused, and that would suppress them as well. So two different ways, but typically if you structure your code and put if you do like a model view controller design, then you will have your model. So your structs will be in model, and then they will be set to public. And because you set them to public, because they're going to be used elsewhere and accessible from outside of that actual file, then you'll have pub for the struct, you'll have pub for the key names, and then it'll compile, and you won't need to use, or you won't need to add allow unused. So I hope that makes sense. Two things here really. Using impl into, obviously that's extra code, which you might not need, depending on how many times you're going to be running this constructor here to actually create an instance. If you're only running it once, well, then there's probably not much point writing all this code. But typically, if you're creating many instances, that's the whole point. Of having a struct, you can be creating it over and over. So yeah, add the impl implementation, and then rather than passing in a string, pass in impl into string, and then because the trait it's always capitals, then you use the lowercase version, obviously with the parentheses, and that function then runs on title, which you're passing in something which isn't a string, but because you've used into, it converts it into string. I hope that's clear. The best way really is just to practice it and use it. So thanks for watching. I'll be back soon with another video. Thanks. A thumbs up and all that. Cheers.